Good afternoon and a warm welcome from all of us at MRSI to today's webinar. The Market Research Society of India, MRSI in short, is a not-for-profit association of providers and buyers of research and insights. The core purpose of MRSI is to create awareness for our industry, establish and promote professional standards, provide a platform for market research professionals, not just to engage, but also to showcase work and to collaborate.
Greetings, this is Ashwini and Sundar. We are your host for the MRSI special webinar series focusing on the impact of COVID and how our industry is addressing these challenges head on. As you're aware that we've been hosting series of special webinars to understand the impact of COVID on our industry. The first of the special webinar of the series was focused on the changes in consumer behavior in India at the time of COVID lockdown. The second webinar was focused on how qualitative research community is geared up to help us get insights despite the limitations that the situation has placed upon us. And today's webinar is focusing on how qualitative research is gearing up to and leveraging various digital methods to get us insights. For this webinar, we have today our insights leaders who have come together to share their perspective. They are experts who are leading through the challenging times. They have helped leapfrog quantitative research practices and adapted the COVID-driven constraints. We are fast-tracking truly path-breaking methods. We are, as a community, therefore, much more stronger and ready for the new normal. The focus of this webinar is to get answers to extremely hard-hitting questions. Will research move to 100% digital methods? What's the next skill needed for insights team? What are the key insights for brands to accelerate growth in the new ecosystem? How do we leverage digital data for strategic advantage? And how COVID has shifted brand perceptions among consumers? And many more questions that will get answered. So with this, I'm extremely delighted to introduce our distinguished speakers for today's session. We have Raja from Ipsos, Ravi Kumar from Dynata, we have Abhinav from InMobi, and Muralidhar from Kantar.
Ashwini, wearing the hat as an MR user, I'm sure you use quantitative research to address many questions that you have. What is the first question that comes to mind in the current context?
Good point. That's a great element over here. Important. That my first concern is how do we leverage, a quantitative research via digital means. I'm not really clear how to take the study design forward in terms of how do we do this, and what are the key design elements that one must consider to do online research that can help us collect data via digital forms.
That's a great first question. Why don't we ask Raja, right? So Raja, what are the key design elements to consider for online research via digital means? So let me quickly introduce Raja and allow him to kind of take the mic and answer this question. Raja is Executive Director, Mobile First and New Initiatives at Ipsos. He's responsible in identifying, developing, testing, and executing new initiatives which enable the business to meet the impacting changes both internally and externally. He also works closely with IIS, which is Ipsos' specialist in Global Center of Online Excellence and Research, on research teams to localize, test, and implement local learnings in India. So who better than Raja? Raja, over to you. Tell us, what do we need to keep in mind?
Sure. Thanks, Ashwini, for asking this very important question, and thanks, Sundar, for the introduction. So, like Ashwini mentioned, I think this is one of the most hard-hitting questions, and I think it is a very important kind of discussion that I'm sure a lot of you would have already had within your organizations and also with some of your research partners. Now, before I kind of delve into more of detail on design elements, just wanted to kind of call out three key elements that I think we should consider or remember whenever discussing online data collection. The first one is continued and seamless access to respondents. And I think this is really one element that we as an industry, whether we are providers of research or consumers of research, cannot afford to stop. Right, this is one pipe that we cannot afford to stop, and which I think online beautifully addresses or is able to meet. The second is speed, which is quite inherent to online, as a methodology, right? A key benefit that online brings to the table. And third one is scalability. And why is it so important, specifically in context to India? Is because when we look at the online journey, the future of online is, how we could actually scale it up. Now, in India's context, one of the most relevant metric would be to look at, how we could scale it up to additional new geographies, right? It could be tier 3, tier 4 towns. In addition, obviously, to certain profiling related variables. So I think these are three important elements that, I would really want to call out. And then moving on to, Ashwini talked about the new normal. Ashwini kind of also mentioned how the post-COVID times are testing times. And I think that brings us to a very important point, that number one, we will have to adopt new ways to engage with respondents, right? I think both from providers, consumers, as well as from our respondents. Also, the huge army of interviewers who are on the field to collect data. So we need to really adopt new ways to engage with respondents, right? We as researchers, and obviously with help and support from clients, will have to adapt to new ways of capturing data, and in certain cases, analyzing. I'll touch upon this briefly as we move forward. And at the same time, having said this, it is also important for us to keep on investing on research to help us, take informed decisions, which is based on scientific testing. And I think it is very, very important right now in the online space, because, online might not be new globally, but I think in terms of how it will evolve in the near future in India, it does need a lot of thought out approaches. It does need a lot of scientifically tested point of views for us to take very important decisions. And that brings me to one of the most relevant strategies in the current environment as far as digital data collection modes are concerned, is a very clear adopt and an adapt strategy. Now, adopting is to do with new methodologies, so which is obviously digital, and also kind of work towards moving into a very strong way to adapt the changes that the new methodologies are going to bring in. And with that, we get into the design elements, because I think one key area of any methodology is how dynamic are the design elements, what kind of considerations one would need to build to kind of ensure the targeted outcomes. And within the preview of online, there are three key elements, design elements, that I would like to call out. One, sampling, which I think is the most fundamental one. Then getting into representativeness, I'm sure a lot of you would have already had a lot of discussion around how representative it is in terms of both target group and geographic coverage. We'll touch upon that. And thirdly, which I think is going to be a very important adapt metric, is the survey instrument, right? The question and how we adapt into it. Now, moving on to sampling. Now, from the online perspective, there are three key kind of sampling frameworks. One, a single source, wherein you kind of source samples only from one source. It could be just one platform, it could be just one panel, and the second could be through a blended strategy, wherein you kind of start to source samples through multiple sources. It could be multiple panels, it could be a mix of double opt-in panels, it could be a mix of mobile-based platforms, and the third one could be mixed mode. And in the current context, where I think face-to-face is going to get very difficult, and I don't think face-to-face is going to be in the same avatar, if I could call it, in the future as well. And mixed mode, I think the next relevant methodology could be telephonic, right? So I think from that perspective, maybe online digital collection tools, data collection tools could also kind of interact with telephonic as a methodology. So I think that brings us to a mixed mode discussion. Now, having called out these three, I will kind of briefly talk about, key kind of considerations that will really help you make a very informed choice. One is to have a clear understanding on quality and responsiveness of different sources, and how the respondents are being recruited and incentivized. And I think the later is quite important, because it really tells you how a particular source behaves, and also from where the respondents are coming. And that kind of brings us to a lot of discussion from the sampling point of view. The second is clear and deep expertise on various sources, sample balancing, quota management, and sample design. Obviously, you can draw parallels with what we have been doing in the past. But I think in the context of online, it is very important to have a clear point of view on these, and scientific testing for us to be take decisions which are very well evaluated, and help us or enable us to take those informed decisions. Now, in addition to these, I think IR, which is incidence rate, is a very important element to consider. I think it is new as far as a lot of people who are migrating from offline to online is concerned, because in offline we haven't looked at IR in a big way, but it does kind of impact quite a lot. So I think that is one. And eventually, whatever sources you kind of go through, whatever sampling framework you kind of adopt, the final outcome, should be kind of that it should enable us to draw samples from respondents who are real, fresh, engaged, and unique. I think that's the core objective of any sampling framework, in addition to being representative and scalable. Now, moving on to the representativeness point of view. So within target group, I think there are three, broad profiles about broad variables that we talk to in terms of access, basis age groups, basis gender, and then SCC and CCS, right? I think these first two are quite well kind of covered as far as online digital platforms, specifically online, is concerned. However, when we look at SCC, now we do realize that a big chunk of SCC is normally not very readily accessible, because of various reasons, right? In certain cases, the double opt-in panels do not have that representativeness. The other is we might actually face on-the-ground challenges of executing certain methodologies. However, when you start to migrate from a study which actually included A, B, and C to an A/B kind of a metric, you need to leverage or have at hand a lot of information how such samples will behave. And I think this is where from the sampling framework, a blended sample strategy might actually be able to mitigate the impact of change. All right, a lot of informed choice, a lot of informed kind of documents or testing on ROR will also help you make that change. At the same time, as far as target group is concerned, it is also important for us to expand the scope of pre-target variables. And I think this is something that, I keep talking to panel providers and saying that, now is the time for the panels to evolve beyond, the basic framework of target group pre-profiling variables, right? We need to have regular engagement surveys to uncover specific behavior. It could be preferences, preferences, it could be attitudes, right? I think, and I do understand that they are dynamic, but some kind of framework which will help us understand target respondents to make them more representative is also going to be a very powerful tool for us to do. The second big element, specifically from India's context, is geographical coverage. Now, as far as you are doing, top 20 cities, I don't think there is a discussion. I think they're very well represented. But I think one key element where I think, we as researchers and also, in the discussions that we have with clients, is how we can actually look at the changes which online will bring as far as reaching out to small town classes are concerned. Do we continue to build a design where we want city-specific sample? Or we can move to clusters of cities and start analyzing them collectively as regions or zones or any sensible kind of a unit or a metric which will help us map it back to our internal business metric. So I think this is one key area that we as an industry need to think about and adapt as we move forward. Now, that is one as far as coverage is concerned. The other is, I think, a very interesting data point which has emerged from a research initiative. And if you look here, it clearly kind of shares the kind of representativeness one would get in terms of geographic coverage within the city. Right, it talks about 4 big metros, but I think the big message here is if you take online, it gives you a very wide coverage and extended coverage not only of offline locations but also gated communities. And if I were to put a number to it, it was 2.6 times higher as compared to offline. So I think within city, online is something which will help us address that in a big way. And this is from an ROR engagement. The final element that I wanted to talk about are the questionnaires. Now, and I have done that in the early days of my career, wherein I have kind of tried to include everything that I want to ask a respondent, right? And I think that is not something that is going to work in the current environment, right? We have to deconstruct our offline questionnaires and prioritize information. So I think that is one, right? The other is also look at the way we are capturing data. One example could be we move from associations to maybe ratings, because we also need to understand the impact a particular methodology or the way of questioning is going to have when the respondents looks at the questionnaire, right? India is a big mobile market, and a lot of data is consumed on the mobile, and a lot of device agnostic surveys are being consumed. So most of the respondents are going to take surveys on the mobile phones. Gamify, right? And I think in this goes hand in hand with deconstructing offline questions, right? Gamification really helps respondents to keep engaged, right? And that has a very good impact on quality as well. And the fourth one is online brings in complete different dimension to quality, and I think it is quite enhanced. I'll not dwell a lot of detail because that I'm sure really get covered. But I think from the questionnaire point of view, it is also important to kind of include a few trap questions, right? To kind of get at quality at a survey level, and you don't need to have a lot of them. Maybe 1 or 2 are good. And the final one is in terms of LOI, and I think that relates directly to the point that I made on deconstructing offline questionnaires, right? Max should be 20 minutes and not beyond that. And I think finally, if I were to kind of give one message as to how we can adopt is have faith, and faith, not blind faith but informed faith, by utilizing a lot of testing, a lot of scientific testing which is being done and which should be done as we move forward. So I think these were the key thoughts that I had on design elements. Ashwini and Sundar, I hope I've been able to answer the questions you had. And over to you.
Thanks a lot, Raja. I think this was really detailed, and it really brings to life what are the key elements that one should really consider when doing an online data collection.
Yeah, I would agree, Ashwini. I mean, there's quite a bit of revisiting the basics, surveying digitally is definitely very different. But I do have, a pressing question with regards to quality, given that there were norms or, ways of establishing quality when we did surveys face to face. Now, how do we ensure that we're getting good quality data when we do research or seek these responses via digital means? That is a big question in my mind.
I think that's a perfectly fitting question for a situation like this and for this webinar too. Why don't we ask Ravi? I'm sure he and the rest of our members on the panel would have heard these questions coming through from various researchers and research users. So let me introduce Ravi, our next speaker for today. Yeah, so Ravi is a business development director at Dynata. He has over 2 decades of experience in the market research industry. He's worked across leading agencies besides his stint at HP. In his current role, he is responsible for managing various key accounts across select channels. His focus is in terms of offline to online transition, specifically in terms of primary research. He holds a strong belief in adopting global learnings and finding out solutions for problems which are very specific to India, and understanding those in detail will help successful navigating these issues. So before I hand over to Ravi, just a key point for our participants. Feel free to pose your questions to us in the Q&A section, and we will take them towards the end. Thank you. All over to Ravi.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwini and Sundar. Sorry. So just before I talk about the quality control methods, how do we minimize overclaim in online research and all of that, I want to highlight a quick fact. I was checking internal data in 2018. We have done around 60,000 online completes in a month on an average. And when I looked at 2019, there was a significant increase, almost a 30% growth in the number of online interviews that we are doing in India. This is just data panel, and of course, I guess the industry would also be similar. So this fact kind of illustrates that online data quality is up to the mark. We are able to manage the data quality, and that's what users are finding it relevant, and they're kind of increasing the scope. So now coming to the quality control methods, there are 3 dimensions which impact quality in online research. First, of course, is the aggregate level data or representativeness that Raja, of course, covered in detail. Therefore, I'll focus on the second bucket, which is at the individual respondent level or the panel member level. In fact, there's a long list of aspects that impact data quality here. And this is where we as researchers have a lot of control in terms of how we can make things work. It could be as basic as how the survey invitation is worded. It could be as basic as the translation, or how the question is structured, how it is phrased, or how it appears on the screen to the respondent. Each of these factors could have an impact in terms of how the individual responds, and therefore whether the data quality is acceptable or not. I'm going to specifically focus on the question design aspect for this session. So one observation in online research is overclaim. When we do projects which assess ownership of products or recent purchase of products, we see a high number. For example, if you were to ask the online respondents, did you purchase a new car in the last 1 year? Almost 59% say that they bought a car. This figure is too high, definitely not accurate, because we know how car sales are and all of that. Now, there could be several reasons why this is happening. In fact, we have seen this even in offline in a different context. When you do concept tests, the high top box scores for purchase intent is that something that is very common. Now, the focus therefore is, how do we moderate this? Is there a better way to ask this question in order to reduce the overclaim? So we did a kind of experiment, a kind of rigorous academic research using 4 different question formats. Of course, this project covered multiple categories, so I'm going to talk about cars here. We in fact validated a lot of information through secondary research and all of that. All that is available in the white paper that we've published. What we can see here is there are 2 question types, which are the direct question types, the yes or no types, and 2 that are the multi-choice questions. Obviously, the direct or leading questions, the yes or no questions, have a high number, which is of course not recommended. It's an age-old learning that we kind of want to avoid a leading question and rather use a multi-choice question where you can camouflage. So of the two multi-choice question types, one question type kind of brings down this number to 26%. It's moderate, it's better, but still this is on the higher side. So as part of the same experiment, we also had certain knowledge-based questions because these are recent buyers of cars. They should be familiar with some of the facts, could be mileage, could be engine size, could be price and all of that. When we looked at that data and did the validation, this 26% came down to 10%. This is far better than the 59% that we started with. The only challenge here is this validation is done offline, post the data collection, and therefore it's not real time. It's not that efficient. And therefore, we kind of tried out one more route. We asked a question in which year they purchased the car they're currently owning. This time, the data distribution was appropriate, at least from what we can see. You can see in 2019, the number we are getting, the 10%, is similar to what we got in the previous method after validation and all of that. And of course, we know that in 2019, there was a sharp drop in automobile purchase, including car purchase. That is coming out clearly here. In fact, when we tested this out in other categories, it could be purchase of houses, purchase of mobile phones, televisions, the trends were consistent. And we even tried this out for intention to purchase, even there it's kind of working well. So therefore, we are in a position to identify an appropriate question format to bring down overclaims. That's a broader learning here. Moving on to the last bucket, which is fraud prevention. From our experience, we know that there's only a small number of people who get into fraud. Vast majority of the respondents are normal consumers like us, but just because of these few people, it can cause a lot of damage in the data quality. The focus is, of course, how we can use technology to kind of manage data quality. That is the foundation. So on the slide, we can see the entire suite of tools or techniques or methods that are available for quality control. And the foundation, as I had mentioned, is obviously technology. We have something like a digital fingerprinting or secure end links, which kind of prevents the same respondent entering the survey multiple times. We get a red flag if someone tries to do like that. On top of that, we can track location behavior, which is latitude and longitude, especially important in retail projects where we want to get the geography right. We can even capture the device details, be it the brand, the model number, etc., to see if the same respondent is trying to enter the survey multiple times. While these technology tools are available, what we also see that the fraudsters are also evolving. They try to see how they can overcome these barriers. Therefore, this is not enough. We'll have to do a lot of manual intervention. It's very similar to what we do in offline. Despite all the checks and balances in the system, the researcher spends time in terms of ensuring that the quality is looked, the data quality is looked at. It could be fact checks or logic checks, trying to see if the data that is coming out is appropriate, cutting and slicing the data, looking at, I mean, of course, offline, we look at investigator level, which city it is coming from and all of that. There's a parallel that exists in online as well. We can, of course, look at open-end responses to see what kind of people are answering the survey. And when it comes to B2B studies, we can have knowledge-based questions to see, because we typically seek experts in this domain, and the person who's entering the survey, is he someone capable of giving an appropriate response or not. So there are multiple ways in which the quality can be managed. We're not saying it's all perfect, everything is fine. It's an evolving thing. We keep learning project after project and kind of apply that and thus get better quality research. So broadly, that's it in the context of quality management. Back to you, Ashwini and Sundar.
Thanks a ton, Ravi. It really helps clear many questions I had in my mind on how can quality be assured, when we are adopting newer means of collecting data, especially online research.
Yeah, I think that's true for me too. I think from a users of research, it really helps understand the end-to-end management of quality, and therefore elevates the fear and brings in more confidence to do more quantitative research on a digital platform.
And Ashwini, you're right. We have to adopt newer ways of collecting the data and information we need to learn about our consumers. But at the same time, there are so many new breakthrough technologies out there that can be leveraged. So the question is, what is the technology we can leverage to unlock these new research capabilities? We're not just able to connect with consumers for feedback response, but also leverage technology to analyze the response too. So let's ask this question to Abhinav. And Abhinav, quick introduction. Abhinav is a mobile marketer with experience handling global businesses across mobile advertising and mobile research. He is the founding member of InMobi Pulse and has been the general manager of the product since inception. Coming from a MarTech background, Abhinav is looking to bring a fresh lens of technology to reimagine research solutions, which would enable brands and agencies globally to answer business questions in the digital era. So over to you, Abhinav. Tell us how we're leveraging technology.
Thanks, Sundar, for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, technology can indeed help us unlock a lot of new research capabilities. Some of them have been listed down in the page in front of you. These can then help brands answer new business questions, which were previously not getting answered through traditional research methodologies. But in the interest of time on this webinar, what I will do is I will deep dive into only two of these specific use cases. The first one being access to previously inaccessible consumers. At the risk of sounding narcissistic, let's look at me as a consumer. So I use the typical hair care and skincare products from Unilever and P&G. We at our home use Saffola oil and Everest masala for cooking. We use Scotch Brite and Prill for cleaning utensils. I love Cadbury's chocolate. I eat a lot of Britannia biscuits. I also have a 7-month-old baby, so we use Pampers, in fact, a lot of Pampers. And we also use Marico Coco Sol for her. I also shop on e-commerce portals like Myntra and Amazon. And I'm also what you would call an L1M consumer of Swiggy as well. Now, while most of these products are used by a lot of people in India, it obviously makes sense for companies to also get feedback from people like me, right? Now, let's look at how traditional offline research for any of these categories can get my feedback. They can't reach me at my home since I live in a gated community. They can't reach me in office. I mean, whenever it opens up, since it's in a tech park. They can't stop me inside or even outside a hypermarket or a mall or an airport. So how do you get my feedback? And that's the fundamental problem with offline surveys. While recruiters can connect with people directly in multiple locations, like independent houses, local markets, bus stands, etc., there are multiple places that they don't get access to. And that's where mobile research and new technology comes into play. So leveraging mobile-first programmatic research, we at InMobi Pulse get deterministic signals from users on their location and technography. Using our proprietary polygon technology, we are able to deterministically target users who are in a particular location or have been in a particular location over the last 30 days, and then send them an in-app survey. One can also get the exact handset brand, model, and the price range of the consumer. Now, this can then be used for either direct recruitment or also enrichment of survey data as well. Now, before I move to the use cases, one thing I would love to call out is that all of this data that is collected and used is used in a secure, aggregated, and anonymized fashion. And we do not compromise on the privacy of the user in any manner. We comply to all the laws and regulations in any region that we operate, right? So having said that, the question is, how can you leverage this, right? Now, one of the key use cases that we see our clients use this is for accessing premium audiences. And we talked a little bit about that. And if you use a combination of stated data, which is NCCS, you can then either combine it with location data and or the handset price data. And then clients can now fill in that gap from their offline research. The next use case is in-store consumer feedback. And that's especially interesting for consumer durable brands, retail brands, and CPG brands as well. So if you think about a consumer durable brand, this can be used for benchmarking the consumer experience across your own branded store versus that of the competitors versus that of a multi-brand retail outlet. So one can then map out different data points like quality of promotion material, information provided by an in-store seller, cleanliness of the store, quality of the demo products, and so many more parameters. This can also be used by retail or CPG companies to understand how consumers are shopping within modern trail outlets. And if you think about the current situation, now more than ever, a contactless research is required when it comes to location. Because now within modern trade outlets, you can understand which items are being noticed more. Is my newly launched product getting enough eyeballs or not, and so on and so forth. Last but not the least is out-of-home attribution and measurement. As the world starts to open up, brands will be, obviously more careful and diligent about where they spend their marketing dollars. Out-of-home advertising tends to be a black box in terms of measuring marketing ROI. Now, this can be interestingly solved by polygon technology, where users who are in the view shed of a billboard, which is basically a location from where they can view the offline marketing activity taking place, you can target those users and send them a BLS. In fact, one can also combine the stated brand lift data with actual footfall measurement in and around that area to come to a much more holistic and deterministic measurement and attribution methodology. For the next point, let's look at a communication strategy for a typical CPG brand. They would typically, work with the research agency, to identify and segment their TG. They would build advertising creatives post that, test them, and then finally run those advertising creatives on different media sources, both offline as well as on digital, and then look for marketing ROI through, BLS or sales uplift or one of those things. So let's take an example here. Post the segmentation exercise for one of our brands. A part of their TG is someone like Reena. Now, Reena is a mom who juggles between her job, her family, and her household. She's ambitious and driven at work. She's loving and caring at home. She ensures that her family is, eating healthy and staying fit, and she's very much updated with the latest trends of, organic and healthy food. Having said all of that, she also manages to find time for herself and ensures that she has time to unwind. Now, this is the kind of persona that CPG brand would like to talk to. And everything around the messaging, the creative, the targeting, everything is centered around this TG. Now let's look at how do they actually target this persona on digital media. Due to the lack of qualitative and psychographic data sets available, they end up targeting females 25 to 45 years old with a Nielsen DAR score of 70% and above. That is what is available on the digital medium. So suddenly, all the research and segmentation exercise that has been done till now goes for a toss. How do you connect the dots? A solution for this is what we call seed audiences. Step one, understand and identify some of these segments and translate them into targetable segments. Now let's take an example of the work we did with a liquid detergent brand in Asia Pacific. We ran a large scale survey to understand the barriers of usage for this low penetration category, and then created sub-segments like bargain hunters, laggards, and skepticals based on these barriers. Now, this is great, but for this to be relevant for media, it has to be at a much, much larger scale. And hence our step two is scale it up. So while our survey had more than 10,000 respondents, we scaled it up using lookalike segmentation where we found similar users to these subsegments using around 50 odd data points on our programmatic channel, and then scaled up each segment to around 1 million users each. This brings me to step three, which is connect with them with relevant messaging. So, in this case, a bargain hunter was told how liquid detergent is more economical in the long run as compared to the powdered detergents, versus a skeptical who was told more about the functionality and efficiency and effectiveness of the product in general. All of this is great, but it's not complete unless we do step four, which is close the loop. We then close the loop by understanding how effective the media campaign was at a creative cross-segment level. This told us exactly how well each message resonated with each segment, both in terms of the brand metrics and eventually in terms of the final aggregated sales uplift as well. Now, this is obviously a use case for a low penetration category. This can also be actually used for a high penetration category, like let's say shampoo or toothpaste. The way you would use it is you would use it for competitive conquesting. So you would look at, highlighting specific benefits over the competition basis your product usage and brand usage given by the user. You can also use this for cross-category sales using a combination of category usage, brand usage, and a frequency of usage as key parameters. So these two are the only points I wanted to cover in detail in this webinar. But I definitely want to call out that while we've talked about only 2 points, there are a lot of different ways in which technology is now enabling path-breaking research. And this is not just true in US and Europe, because that's a common misconception, right? It's actually true in a place like India as well. It's just that we as researchers just need to ensure that we have our eyes and ears open to recognize the change and actually be a part of it. That's all from my end, Sundar and Ashwini. Over to you guys.
Thanks a lot, Abhinav. This has been really insightful to know how unique technologies can be leveraged. And I think the big takeaway from me is in terms of how a technology can complement another technology. So every technology has its pros and cons, but more important and the better usage of technology is how it can complement with so many other streams of technology, and therefore can help deliver a deep level of insights and analysis.
Absolutely, Ashwini. Also to me, leveraging new technology is in some way an ultimate adaptive power play. However, I'm sure there are challenges. For example, doing a survey digitally might require a shorter questionnaire, as we heard, Raja and Ravi speak about earlier. And also the ability to respond to a survey sent in a digital format is another challenge. So here's a question to Murli. How do we solve the current tech challenges? I mean, while technology opens up some doors, also puts up some challenges in front of us. And what are those new emerging technologies that we need to keep in mind? Just, building on the comment that, Abhinav made in terms of technology, being there, and we need to be just opening our eyes to kind of see it. So a quick introduction, Murli, before I pass on the mic to you. Murli is Regional Operations Director, South Asia at Kantar, multifaceted management professional with over 2 decades of experience in market research and MR offshoring industry, spanning Gallup and Kantar, of which 19 years have been in Kantar, with stints across different operating companies. While for most part of his career, he has been in client servicing and business management roles, he's also worked in other functions, such as a year in HR in the L&D function, managing delivery center, and now for the last 3 years, driving operations for Kantar. Murli was heading the South India and Bangladesh business of the erstwhile Millward Brown identity before moving into the current role in 2017 as Regional Operations Director of Kantar South Asia. Murli specializes in conceptualizing solutions to different business issues and needs and translating the findings into insights that help in taking effective business and marketing decisions. So Murli, over to you. Tell us, how we adapt to these changes. How do we address some of these challenges, and what are the new technologies that you see that are emerging? And sorry, Murli, just before I let you speak, if our participants have questions, feel free to type it in the questions panel. We will take it up in the Q&A session at the end of all the speakers sharing their views. It's quite possible that we may not have sufficient time, but we will host responses in our MRSI website. Murli, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sundar. I think you raised a very pertinent question on, future, and I think future needs to be looked at from balancing on how do we solve for the current challenges that we will have in spite of all the different technologies and other things that we have, and also leverage truly what's coming up from a scalable point of view in the mid to long term future. So there are 3 contexts to me that I thought would be relevant before we get into the specifics. One is the fact that face-to-face fieldwork is restricted. It will not be the same. We all know that. And also the current online solutions do offer audience, but it's a specific set of audiences. But the reality is a lot of the brands, particularly the mass market brands, have target group which spans demography and geography. So how do we solve for their need for voice of consumer across the length and breadth of their targeting group in this current situation? The other is the fact that while, as Raja rightly pointed out, the length of the interview needs to be shorter. I mean, it's more than length. I think it's the number of questions and how you render it, which is more important in online. But there are kind of studies, particularly the UNA kind of studies, a large segmentations where, or tracking, for example, where you would have, larger questions. So it kind of leads me to three key questions. One is, how do we ensure a fully representative audience for online self-completion? And how do we ensure a comprehensive information coverage without increasing the survey length? And finally, a mid to long-term question on, how do we leverage and scale using the conversational AI and voice, particularly from a future data collection angle. And I'll try to address these three by different, use cases or case studies, as you may call it. The first one on representative audience, I think it's about merging the two worlds. And like I mentioned, you need voice of consumer across the demography and the geography. So the approach is like building a combo solution, using a smart way, using the different approaches of recontacting the past interviewed respondents, and doing it in the manner in which it can be merged effortlessly without the mode of the interview impacting the data. And we've seen that to be fairly strong in terms of providing actionable data across brands DG for the kind of brands we've done this work. And it can also be successfully scaled up for multiple categories and different types of work. So it's essentially about merging the two worlds and finding a smart way of merging the two data sets for an actionable finding for the client. It's as simple as just the way I said, merging the two worlds. The second, which is about how do we ensure comprehensive coverage, particularly in cases where you need information truly for business decisions, which may mean that if you do a single source survey, it will probably run into 30 minutes or thereabouts. So here, the case example is of a tracking study, which is, covering a range of questions, including image and, reactions to advertising campaigns in different media channels. And the survey length was indeed exceeding more than 25-30 minutes. So the solution is what we call a split cell design. It's nothing new, but I think it's about how we build that split cell intelligently to ensure that the core information is covered from the full audience that you go to. And some of the diagnostic information, you actually split it into 2 or 3 cells, depending upon the length of the information or the information coverage desired. The question therefore is, okay, that can be done, but then how do we report it? Reporting can be as simple as just reporting it on the 2 panels combined for the KPIs where it's asked across the 2, and the diagnostics being reported on the answering base of the panels. It's as simple as that. And there are situations where you need advanced analysis to be done. For example, you want to do drivers, you want to do Bayesian kind of work. There, obviously, you need the missing information between the panels to be substituted, to be filled in. And that's where, a lot of the data fusion methods, either substitution method or even more advanced in terms of, using lookalike within the 2 panels, creating sub-segments, sub-cells and sets within the data set, and therefore use that as a means to use the data and allow for a larger scale statistical analysis to be done. What it really helps out is in one, the optimized design, and therefore provides more feasibility and cost for studies that otherwise couldn't be done online. And also the approaches are reasonably generic in nature, which could then be expanded to any type of study or any context of research. Finally, the third, which is more mid to long term, is about how do we leverage conversational AI? And I'm sure all of us on the call would have been exposed to how conversational AI is being used for customer service and other use cases. And voice, again, voice is something that's becoming more popular in the way a lot of the industries are using voice as a means to reach out to customers and customize stuff. The application we foresee is chatbots and voice-assisted surveys, and it emerges from the opportunity that we have of reaching out to target audiences in social media apps a lot more easily, and also the innate consumer behavior, particularly in India, where we believe that people do love to have conversations, and therefore, if we leverage that, we could get more greater insights. And voice applications also becoming pretty mainstream, whether it's in Alexa, Google Home, Siri, or integration within the IoT kind of stuff. And voice also allows us to personalize the content and the context in which you would want any conversation to be led. So in chatbot, the focus is essentially around how can we build distinctly conversational and AI driven, and give a user experience of a true conversation and not just replicate a short survey into a chatbot, which then undermines the capability that this technology can offer. So there was a recent example of how we could get one uh, chatbot done with a personality called Neo, and how it could help us to understand what the consumers are going through. I think the important part is about how do we build distinctive personas as we go forward for different categories and target groups or context to make it that much more, I would say, consumer friendly and so on. And voice could play two roles. One is allowing respondents to respond using their voice or video, followed by instantaneous decoding using the technologies that are available, and the automated text-to-speech conversion to help respondents within the survey to respond to questions and surveys. As we expanded beyond the typical metros and the upper SECs to lower down the social class, voice can play a big role in actually getting the survey across to the consumers and engage with them. So that's it, Sundar. That's the short and sweet three areas that I thought would be relevant for the audience.
Thanks a lot, Murli. This was really insightful in terms of how we can leverage new age technology too in drawing some inferences and continuing getting feedback from respondents. So big thank you, and also a big thank you to all our distinguished guest speakers today for sharing their perspective. So thank you so much, Raja, Ravi, Murli, Abhinav. Thank you so much for your time. We just have about 5 minutes, and there are a lot of questions that have come through. But before we get into the questions, and maybe we'll just be able to attend to a question or two, just want to say that it clearly comes to me that we are really innovating a lot, and as an industry, and it's really helping us shape the future in the times of change. There's one question that I open it up to the panel right here is what kind of skill sets do you see for a market research professional to hone in this new way of sourcing information from customers or respondents?
Murli here. I think the basic skill sets, of course, of inquisitiveness and analytical ability, if you're in quantitative, and passion for numbers, I think is going to be constant, universal. I think the new skill sets would be, I think, about appreciating what the technology and what the different areas that can help us in the new ways of doing things, and identifying how it could actually fit into a solid use case within the realm of work that we do, both from what we used to do and what we could do in the future. And more importantly, I think also the skill set of how do we adapt and adopt, as Raja said in the beginning, and being more, I would say, open-minded and clear in terms of how we could make it to the best of the use of the technology, rather than fitting into what we already know how things work. So I think, to me, it's more about the mind and how we keep it that much more open and build our experiences to do that.
So that's great. I think we may not be able to. Maybe you could just ask one real quick question in terms of in the face-to-face world. Now we are unable to do a lot of face-to-face interviews. But if we were to do an alternative, leverage an alternative technology to seek feedback, that perhaps impacts the continuity of the data. So, for example, in a brand equity, you've been doing a face-to-face interview, and all of a sudden you intend leveraging alternative means of technology to get the same information. Does it have a lot of impact, or you see that it's easy to manage it? This is to all the panel members. Anyone?
Ashwini,
Ravi
this is
here, I
Ravi.
can.
I think a very important question, and I talked about the importance of ROR and the research on research and scientific testing. Yes, I think when you move from one methodology to the other, it does have implications on the findings. However, what you do with the information available and how you actually account for those variations is more important. And hence I would kind of encourage to go through a lot of learning documents, basis which then a few analytical modules also get developed to also work on statistical methodologies to handle such variations. So yes, I mean, to answer the question in binary, yes, there is an impact. However, through a lot of testing, you can actually work around it and see how useful those variations are.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Raja. Thank you so much for sharing your view on this. Just to quickly mention that to all their members on the webinar today, that we are recording this session and we will roll out a feedback form by the end of the day today or tomorrow. Members could also leverage the same session by logging on to our webpage.
Hi, this is Sundar here again. A big thank you to all our panelists and my co-host Ashwini. Before we sign off, a quick announcement about an exciting webinar that's coming up on the 15th of July. I'm sure a lot of you are regulars and you've taken away a lot from these webinars. Look forward to you signing up for the one that's coming up too. Now, what are we going to have on the 15th? We have Manish Makhijani, Global PDC Director of Unilever, joining us and telling us how we can get insights from call center conversations. So thank you very much. I look forward to meeting you on the 15th of July. Ashwini, for any last words, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for taking time out for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks to our participants and panelists. Good day, good evening.
Thank you. Bye.